Angleman is a brand with no history, no heritage, and no compelling origin story. Just a catalog so bloated you'd think that they built it hitting shuffle on an AI generator and typing in Sinn watches. Now, watch enthusiasts usually dig through microbrand backstories, the garbage startups, the founders' grand vision, and the inspired by tales of adventure, but here, there's none of that. No fairy tale, no legacy, no pretense. And maybe that's refreshing. So let's go right ahead to this Wraith UTC from Engelmaan. Engelman calls this a 45mm case, but that's counting the crown. But we sane people measured it properly and it's just over 41. Lug to lug is 48mm and 13.9 in thickness. And at 200 meters of water resistance, it still survives a swim, or more realistically, an aggressive dishwashing session. The bezel clicks with satisfying precision, not too light, no sloppy backplay. The knurling is a little widely spaced out, so if your finger slips, don't panic. It's more of a grip suggestion than a guarantee. The crown is screwed down as it should be, and it turns this NH34 GMT inside. That means you get a GMT hand, though this is what's known as a caller's GMT. In plain English, the GMT hands moves and not the local hour. Frequent flyers might roll their eyes, but for most people, it's perfectly fine. Set your home time, track another zone, and call it a day. Angleman didn't reinvent the complication, they just included it. The hands are highly legible, styled as floating aviation hands, which is practical on most watches, though slightly odd on this diver. The oversized quarter numerals dominate the dial, so missing them isn't really an option. Strap changes are effortless thanks to the quick release spring bars. Just flick these little levers and the bracelet pops off. No tools, no nails in the wall struggle. Swap it for leather, rubber, or whatever fits your mood and click it back in just as easily as you took it off. Now, the clasp uses a push lock micro adjust, which is very easy to use. Press to unlock, pull to size, and it just ratchets inward whenever you feel like it. It's convenient, it's practical, and it keeps the Wraith sitting comfortably on your wrist. For a microbrand that's otherwise unassuming, these small, thoughtful touches makes the watch feel more considered than its marketing would suggest. Or, more likely, they threw in every single feature that the manufacturer could give them for that larger quantity order. And actually, you as a customer can play the same game by ordering all of these different Velcro straps that could go with this Wraith and other Engelman watches. This strap is actually pretty good. The velcros are nicely formed and shaped, and it has velcros on both ends. The fabric itself is very soft and it's very comfortable to wear. The same thing cannot be said, however, on wearing it on your wrist. You need to place your wrist on any flat surface in order for you to strap on both ends. And this is a byproduct of not having a loop on one end of the strap. I love how soft it is on the wrist, except for that other end that also has a Velcro. They could have done away with that. And also be mindful of unstrapping this, as the watch could easily fall off your hand. They provided me with quick release spring bars for this Velcro strap because the strap itself cannot pass through the spring bars as the Velcros are too thick to pass on. But once you have these quick release spring bars, it's easy to switch and to replace those Velcros with any color that you may have lying. Or maybe use another NATO strap that could easily fit this kind of setup. Yes, it has a tiny learning curve. You may fumble it once or twice, just don't do it in front of the kids. You might utter something that's like above the PG-13 rating, but it's all going to be worth it. Once you get it, the sheer number of strap options makes you feel like a little kid in a candy store, except that the candy is on your wrist. And once it's back on your wrist, it does the job. It gives off that rugged outdoorsy vibe. It's perfectly in sync with that matte finish case. You know, like the watch that spent a weekend hiking and didn't even break a sweat. But with you breaking a sweat while hiking, well, let's just say your mileage may vary. For me, the Wraith on its bracelet is where it really shines. The matte, bead-blasted texture feels surprisingly good against the skin. Not harsh, not slippery. And the taper isn't just for looks. It helps the watch move naturally on my wrist. And that micro adjust, it's a real lifesaver. On a smaller wrist like mine, it's tricky to get a perfect fit without half links, but this system makes it almost effortless. And lastly, Angleman threw everything into the package. There's a solid looking tool you'll probably never touch, and a polishing cloth that's pretty much irrelevant thanks to the scratch resistant plating on the watch. But hey, it's there, so I'll take it. But you know what? That travel case, now that's a win. This thick, elegant leather travel case feels like it belongs to a watch that's 3 times the price. And no, that's not a sponsored line. I just called it like I see it. It's hyperbole included, free of charge. Now let's get to the revealing stuff. Many are saying that Engelman is homaging a lot of Sinn watches, and initially that was my impression as well. I thought this looked like the Sinn U2, and I chose this specific UTC version of the Wraith to further emphasize that similarities. But then, when I look at the Sinn U2 SDR, there's actually a lot of differences. So let's go first to the similarities that we could find. Obviously, you could see that there are these middle links is obviously the same with the Wraith is using here. Even this sand-blasted texture is very, very similar to what Sinn is using. Of course, Sinn is using their tagamented technology, and here we're merely using some scratch-resistant plating for the Wraith. And now, the biggest similarity undoubtedly are these knurlings are a signature of Sinn, and that is obviously seen here. That's what makes people think that this is a homage of a Sinn watch. However, that's where most of the similarities stop. If we look closely, the biggest difference is, of course, the crown. The crown in Sinn watches, especially these U2 models, they use the Seiko placement. And not only that, they have their dates complications at the 3 o'clock position rather than the Seiko position that is found on this Wraith. Another differentiation is that there's a lot of red accents on Sinn watches, and that is not present on these Engelman watches. Engelman does use some accent colors, especially here on the UTC print and highlights on the GMT hand, but aside from that, nothing else is accented, unlike in Sinn watches. Now going to the hands, you could see here that the Wraith is using some floating aviation hands, which is similar to Sinn watches. Of course, Sinn is not the originator of these hands. However, they make it a lot more legible, and thus going back to the toolish nature and to the instrumental personality of this Sinn watch. Now, we do have a lot more of aviation hints here on the Wraith, as you could see with all of the quarter markers being large numerals, and this is one of the identifiers of a pilot watch, and that is absent here on the Sinn, which is a lot more of a dive watch in their configuration, even though both have a GMT complication that, well, one can argue or could easily contend that is not needed on dive watches at all. You two have your own opinions about this Engelman Wraith. James 2001 says that this is a ripoff of the Sinn 857, and yes, he is correct. But I use the U2 instead since the 857 is no longer sold in Sinn's website, and it's not really interesting to compare a direct copy of the watch. As for George, says that I wasn't using the Velcro strap right, and he was right. I wasn't using it properly, and I should have clipped one side onto the spring bar and the other should pass through the actual spring bar, which is a zero pass strap. Well, maybe I can demonstrate that in a later video. Capuchidao also wanted to buy a Wraith. However, when he asked the customs officials, it will amount to 145% of the original cost of the watch, which is a major drawback for this watch because one of the key features of the watch itself is the actual price tag. And once that's gone, it's really hard to justify. And finally, Boss Ray asks, is my knife also a homage? No, surprisingly not. It's a Tucson D2 knife with a G10 handle, and that's actually, surprisingly, an original Chinese design. I have such an ignorance to Sinn watches and their vast catalog that I was really grateful when I was schooled in the comments section about the Sinn 857. It opened my eyes to the vast catalog of Sinn watches, and if I was to sum up their design language, it's all about creating tool watches that has all of the functions and features and practicalities for every possible situation. If you have a fascination for instruments and military mechanical design, then Sinn is the right brand for you. As a designer, I try to limit my design to three different sizes and try to use as much space to relax your eyes when it comes to the actual visual aesthetic. It's not exactly practical for many precision based professions, and Zin made sure that you're fully equipped for that specific task with their watches and their design. And the Zin 857 fully takes advantage of that with its own unique take to the dive slash aviation fusion. Whether in the light or in the dark, from near or from across the room, you could clearly identify a Zin when you see one. But then you might ask, but Jason, why are you talking about the Zin 857 and not the Engelmaan Wraith UTC? Well, because your eyes have a brain and it's telling you that this watch is made indeed by Angleman, but the design came from Sinn watches. Your eyes are smart enough not to tell you to trust an ignorant watch pirate on YouTube telling you about this Engelman watch and how good it is, because he's practically talking about the Sinn 857 all this time. The problem with that is that Sinn doesn't offer that particular watch anymore, and the solution that Engelman came up with is this: a super reliable, scratch resistant, anti magnetic Sinn watch that's a lot less German, and the only story that it could tell is that you can get it for a lot less now.